Hey guys, this is Hogan Williams, and I am showing you guys how I made my animation of the MacBook fly-in and cute little smile guy, as you can see here. Um, I'm going to go over specifically um, this part of the animation right here, starting here and ending here. Um, because I think that's where you guys will probably learn the most. Um, so let's just go ahead and dive in here. Um, and I'm going to be going over probably some basic stuff because it seemed like everyone wanted a pretty wide variety of advanced or beginner level information. So I'm just going to go over everything from start to finish. Um, so what we have here um, is the little ribbon that animates in. And I needed a creative way to get rid of that ribbon. So what I decided to do is I decided to bring these lines in kind of as a guide for what was going to be animating in next, which is a pretty important technique, something that is utilized a lot that actually comes off really well in animation is anticipation. It's something that you learn in a lot of animation tutorials and things like that. So these lines coming in kind of anticipate the incoming geometry that comes in and slides away everything, and it just looks really nice, and it kind of frames what's about to happen next. So let's start with that. And so it's on this transition layer. It's on one layer, and this is a shape layer, as you can see from the little star. So we're going to go ahead and copy this. I have it locked so that I can't edit it because I'm going to make a new one and walk you guys through everything. So we're going to do shape layer here. I'm going to drag this down, and we're just going to name this tutorial for the sake of keeping everything right. So this composition has motion blur on, which is why we get those nice little soft edges here. But we have to turn it on for every layer, every new layer we make. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. I'm going to twirl it down, and we're going to zoom in a little bit here. And we want to start off and kind of try and make everything the same as the rest of it. And so I can barely see this little dot here. So I know that it starts right here. So we're going to go ahead and add another line. And we'll add this, I don't know, we'll add this here for our purposes. And so I'm using the pen tool. I'm just going to come in here, and I've made the line. I've made it really bad, and I'm just going to try and straighten it up as best I can. You can use guides to make things straight, but I don't really care because just need to show you what's going on. And I come up here and I add this. Okay, thank you. I add a stroke width to it, so I'm going to go ahead and go up to maybe 5 pixels for my stroke, and I'm going to have it white. So after we've done this, it should pop up in our contents, and there it is, shape 1. And the way I animated it in is I went to shape 1 and I actually added an extra, I don't know what you would call this, but just another, I guess, transform property or something. So what I did was I added trim paths. And this is actually really useful. It's a very useful addition to a shape layer like this. So what it gives us is a couple different options. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ignore these two because I don't use them in this part. But I'm going to add these keyframes, and clicking these stopwatches automatically adds a keyframe in my current position. And if I move ahead, which I'm going to do now, move ahead and find the end of the animation, which is, I'm going to say here. And I come in and I change this value to something else, it'll add a keyframe automatically. Since this is both these keyframes are 100, nothing's actually going to happen. So we're going to move back to this first keyframe, which I can do by pressing left on this, which says go to previous keyframe. And I'm going to change this to 0. And you can see that sliding up there. So it's 0. You can kind of see that it's still there because of the motion blur, and it kind of interpolates the frames for us. So you see it's still there, and what happens is it trims the end of the path up to 0%. Kind of think of this as 0% being the beginning of the path. If I had drawn the path opposite, if I had started here and moved up, then the end would be here and the beginning would be here. So when we were at 0%, both of those edges would be here. So since we're both at 0 and it's the opposite, both edges are here. So as we move along, you can kind of see, if I deselect this, you can kind of see it draws it in from start to finish. And now we're at 100% completion. So start is where it should be, 0. End is where it should be, 100. So that's all well and good. But what I want to do is I want to take this and continue on until right about here. And I'm going to add another keyframe because when this is done sliding, we need these lines to animate away. So it's done on that frame. So now that we have that, we're actually going to pull this start value and we're going to pull it all the way to 100. So what that does is this keyframe here has a value of 0. This keyframe here has a value of 0 as well, which means it's not moving over this time, and then it jumps to 100, which means, if we watch the animation, the start point flies down and hits the end point, which means it's on top of each other and you can't see it anymore, which is really nice. That's what we want. So let's go ahead and play this through, and it does exactly what the other ones did, which is nice. Another little technique that I did is, if you notice, when it comes in, it's a lot thinner than when it's sitting there. It's just kind of an extra little addition to it that makes it look a little bit nicer. So what we can do is we can go into the stroke and we'll do the same thing, and we'll be adding keyframes here. So we want it to, let's say, we'll try and keep it uniform. So it starts growing about here. So right here we'll add this stroke width and we'll change it to 3. And then we'll move ahead 3 frames and change this to 5. So what's going to happen is it's going to be thin when it's coming in, and then it'll grow a little bit. And it just adds that extra layer of animation that really makes things look professional and nice. And it's these little subtle things that create the end product to look as good as it does. So that's the basic thing for that. That's pretty simple. Trim paths is a really helpful tool. You'll use it a lot for sure in motion graphics. So we're going to go ahead and delete that because we're done. And we're going to pull this ahead and we're going to see what we did with this shape layer. It's the same thing. It's on the same layer. And what it does is it draws itself in. So we have the opacity value 0 and now it's 100. And it flies up, stays around for a couple frames, and then peels itself off up top. And all I did with this was make one, duplicate it, change the shape a little bit to change it to this color, and do it again, and just stack them on top of each other, and then offset the values a little bit to end up looking like that. And let's go ahead and run through that real quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another path here. Zoom in a little bit. And it doesn't have to be great, just something quick, dirty, so you can see what I did. And let's, oh, green works actually, so you can see very well what I'm doing. Alright, cool. So what we want to do is we actually animated the path in this one. Similar to animating masks, if you've ever done that. What we're going to do is we're going to add this keyframe here, and we're going to move along, and you're going to see that this is motion blurred, but it's not actually moving on this frame yet. So we're going to add another frame. Motion blur is just here to show that the next frame we're moving pretty quickly. So what I'm going to do is find where I think it might stop, which I'm going to guess is here. And to deselect these real quick, I usually just click here on shape and then click path, and now they're all deselected. And what you can do is with the selection tool is if you click on the line, you'll see my mouse turns black. It'll select both of these vertices that we want to edit. So I'm going to go ahead and click this, and then I'm going to hold shift so it snaps to this vertices, or this axis, sorry, and pull it up to here. So I have enough room for the next part of it to come up. So that looks about right, pulls it up. And then I wait a couple frames. Actually, it needs to be a little bit shorter. So it pulls up, wait a frame or two, and then I'm going to grab this again, and then I'm going to pull this back up to, oh wait, no, that's not what I'm going to do. Sorry. I'm going to drag this out to about here, where I think it would be off screen, and then I pull this guy back up. So now what's going to happen is it's going to pull up. Oh, you know what? I need to change this a little bit. I messed up, guys. We go back. So what we're going to do is we need to add another keyframe here because it moves too quickly. I want it to pause and then move to its final position here. Nope, sorry. Make sure to select these two keyframes, or these two vertices. Pull this up to the top. So now the first part slides away, second part sticks around for a little bit, and then it flies out. So it makes that kind of look. So what we did now is, what we have to do is we need to duplicate this. So I'm going to name this something easy to remember, green. And then I'm going to come here and I'm going to Control D and duplicate it, and it'll pop up above it, and then we'll make this one, I don't know, yellow. Go for like a mellow yellow or Mountain Dew look here. I'm going to pull this below. And you can see its keyframes here, which is nice. It's what we want. I want to be able to see everything. And we're just going to offset this by, let me change the color first so that we can better tell the difference. Change this to an ugly yellow. Whatever, don't care. And so now you can see it come in, and then the yellow is there, but it's not quite right. I'm going to pull these keyframes out a little bit more, so there's a little bit of extra time. But what we really need to do is we need to edit the path. So we're going to go ahead and hide this green so we can see what we're doing. So we didn't want it to start there. We wanted to start here. And it looks like I still need to pull this out just a tad bit, like here or here. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on this keyframe, and we need to get a hold of this bottom, or actually this vertex right here, vertex. And since we're on this keyframe, we're going to move back to this keyframe right here, because this is important. So we want to edit this on this keyframe, because if we pull this down to around there, holding shift by the way, on this keyframe it's going to look like that, but since we didn't edit it on every keyframe, it's going to move back up to where we didn't want it. So I'm going to have to go back and change all these back down to this. It isn't a huge pain, but for some projects it can be. I'm going to pull that back down. And if you notice, it pulls back up again, but on mine it also pulls back up again. And I left it because I kind of enjoyed the look of it conforming back to that shape. So I left it in, and I'm actually going to pull this back 2 frames. I'm going to re-enable green. Let's see what this looks like. Now we haven't changed the opacity for any of these yet. We'll do that at the end. So green gets pulled up, and then yellow starts to get pulled up, but green flies up before, then blue flies up, or no, I'm sorry, then yellow flies up behind it, which is cool. And then we need our final color, which is easy because we've already made this little slab here. So we can just come in here, duplicate, and we'll name this white, because I'm going to just change it to white. And change the fill to white. And then we just need to offset the values of the keyframes by 2, keep it even, 1, 2, and it doesn't look even because it's all off-centered here, but that looks better. So now what we got, and I'm going to go ahead and hide this so we can see what we've done. Now it all pulls up, and you know what? It still doesn't look quite right because we need to change its opacity for everything. So we're going to do, come in here, actually, twirl this back down, and under the transform of the green shape, we don't want it to appear until here. So we're going to set the opacity here. So right there we want 100%. We're going to back up 1 frame and make it 0. Another trick you could do is you could have toggle this as a hold keyframe. So it'll hold it at 0 and it won't interpolate it at all until that, and then it'll appear as 100%. So that's a good value. What we want is 0 to 100. We want that for all the layers. So I'm going to Control C, copy this, and then go back to yellow. And I want it to appear right here. And we're going to paste it in for opacity, paste it in here for the other value, still offset, mind you. Then we're going to come back into the white, do the same thing, offset again by another 2 frames. I'm clicking this and then Control V. It'll paste it where your playhead is. It should look a little bit closer to what we had before, if not the same. And so that's more or less what you're looking at. I messed up. Didn't make it exactly right, but that's okay. You get the idea. It's the same sort of idea. Pulls it up out of the way. And so now it's revealed. And all I did was copy, paste this, rotated it, so it was coming off the bottom instead. So that's a good start for some shape layer animation, path animation. You'll notice at the very end of this, you've got a nice little burst, which I think makes it look kind of nice. Like it doesn't just disappear into thin air, kind of bursts into a couple little pieces. I named that dot flare, and I pre-composed it, which means it's in its own composition. So we're going to double click on that, and we'll see what we did here. So we'll zoom in. And this is also on its own composition, these dots. So I'm going to double click on the dots comp. And so what we have here, we have an oddly shaped comp because, again, I'm lazy and changed it to whatever. And what we have is another shape layer. And here, we just have a sphere that's pushed in to make a teardrop looking ellipse. And we're animating the transform property. So if you come down here, the position and the scale are changing. And the position is going from here to here, and the scale is dropping dramatically to make it disappear. So we have that, and all we do is duplicate it 3 times, offset it a little bit, not in time but in space, so that it all kind of comes out at the same time, disappears. And all we do is we take that, bring all these 3, now that it's under dot flare, it should be up here, and then we just drag it in, and now it's here. And I just put it in right after this disappears. I put it right there to show up, and it animates out. And it looks good. We do the same thing up here, but just rotate it to make it burst off like that. And just adds a nice level of quality to the end of your animations. Now, one of the more complicated animations coming in is this crazy screen flying in from back here. So this is where we're going to get a little bit complicated because it deals with 3D elements. So what this is the top fly front, both of these layers. And what I've done is I animated this first one, top fly front, and then duplicated it, and then parented it with this option over here. What parenting does is it allows this layer to control, when it's animated, anything like its position, its size, all those different things, to control another layer. So you can see that this actually doesn't have an animation curve or anything like that, yet it still flies in with the other layer because this one is animated. Now, how I went through and animated it, this is where it gets a little bit complicated. So we'll hit U. It's going to bring up our all of our changed values. If you hit U again, it'll drop it down. If you hit UU, it brings up every single editable value here. So we'll hit U again and then U to bring up what we've edited. And we'll see that we actually have another a value, a Z value. That means we actually are in 3D space. And the reason we have this value is because this switch is enabled. And this is 3D layer. It enables 3D space. So we have Z rotation, and we have position X, Y, and Z. Z is our depth, in and out kind of depth. So now that we have that enabled, what we need to do is we need to make a camera. So what you can do is you can right-click New Camera, and it'll make you a camera. And I just have the default one. I've yet to experiment with different kinds of cameras and things like that, but you can simulate different film types and lenses and that kind of thing. But once we set this up, camera just kind of sits there. We set this orientation is for the camera shake later on. But we set our point of interest, the position, the rotation, things like that. It's all normal stuff. But then the camera options is where we get a little bit more in depth. So we want it to zoom right where we want everything, the composition. If you see, you can zoom out. And it's just like zooming a normal camera. We'll edit undo that back to its regular value. Depth of field on. That's what's adding this blur in the back. Because we have this layer, we wanted to focus on this distance. So everything behind or in front by a certain value is going to be blurred. And as it moves closer, it's going to slowly come into focus. Those things can be changed, like focus distance. It's 986 pixels away. That's right where we want that. And the aperture, both of these things change the blur level of things that are farther away or closer to the camera. That's more of just tweaking to your liking. I can't give you an exact thing, but typically you want your focus distance obviously to be the same distance from the camera to the object you want in focus. So in my case, it's 986 pixels. So now that that's set up, what we want to do is we want to animate. We want to animate the top of this computer to fly in like it does. And so how I did that is I set the rotation. We'll do the basic stuff first. So X, Y, and Z. I wanted it to flip around 4 times by the time it comes from here to landing. So what I did was I took this in to where I wanted it on this keyframe, and I set all these to 0. So that's important because I want this exactly straight on by the time it lands on the base of the computer. And then what I do is I pull this back to where I want the beginning of the animation, and I set up the X rotation to be 4 times. So I want it to flip 4 times before it lands. And then I just changed these, I tweaked these a little bit to make it a little bit more natural looking. That was just personal preference, random values. The opacity I have changing, it kind of just comes in a little bit, like maybe there might be a little bit of fog in the background. I just change it to make it a little bit more smooth rather than it just appearing out of nowhere. Luckily it's fast enough to where you wouldn't really notice it anyway, so it just kind of flies in. Now the most important part is the position. So because we want it to be far away, we want it to come in from that back right corner, back left corner. What we're going to do is we're going to change our view. Right now we're looking at camera 1. We're going to add 2 views, horizontal, which means they'll be laid out left to right like this. So we have our camera 1. This is what we're going to end up rendering. And this is the top view. So this is where it gets a little confusing. This little line is actually all of those layers. You can see where I select it, and these are all selected now. That's just sitting there in Z space. It's not moving, it's right in the middle. And we have our camera, which you can see all the different controls, which is also not moving. We want that to stay just like that. But you can see this line out here. That is our computer screen. So these values are what determine where this thing is flying in from. So what I have here is I have it really far down in the X value. So if I change this, you'll see that it's far left from center. I'll Control Z to get that back to the normal. And it's a little bit lower than center of that, of our destination value. So Control Z, get that back. Now Z space is the most important thing. It's 2,440 pixels away, which is why it's so far back in the distance. It wouldn't look nearly as good if I brought it up to, close up and tried to basically animate it in a different way where I kind of fake that it's far away. I'd rather just have it set up to where it does it for me. It does all of the effects for me by just animating what it would look like, coming in from that far away. So what you're looking at here is just the curve of where it travels, because after you set these keyframes, you want to come in and make sure it doesn't just fly straight to the position. You want it to kind of curve up. So what you need to do is just come in, and when you click keyframes, these little handles will show up, and you can pull them out to kind of give a curved angle to come in and land on that base. I accidentally dragged that out. So that's what gives you that look. Now, as for the explanation of this top fly front and top fly back, is when it was rotating, it was showing the orange screen part, and it would rotate and it would show the orange screen part again on the back. And so since I didn't want that, I needed a layer to cover that up that looks like the base. So I made a top fly front color or shape and made the contents top screen. I just copied and pasted everything, but I gave it a fill, and the fill was the same color as the base. So it makes it look a little bit better. You may or may not have to do that for whatever you're using, but in this situation that was important to actually be able to see that it was really rotating in space and landing. Just since I'm here, I'm doing this, I'll show you the little loading screen thing. So that's in its own little pre-comp. So we'll go in here and, oh, if you're curious to pre-comp something, let me add a new shape or something. New shape layer, whatever. Okay, so green thing. So let's say I had 2 of these. What you can do is you can right click and pre-compose. It'll add it to a new composition, which just kind of cleans up your work area for large projects and things like that. So we're going to undo that because I don't need that. Undo it twice. There we go. So we'll come in, we'll look at face. So what are we doing here? We are making these little loading bits, which some of you didn't like. I thought it was funny because my Mac has little memory and drives me nuts working on my Mac when I'm not at my house. So much slower. But so what this is of course, look, I get lazy, don't name them. We're transforming, or actually let's talk about the content first. So contents, this is important. So what we do is we just make a simple path and then stroke it by 14 pixels. And what you can do is you can actually add a little round cap here to make it have those little soft beveled edges instead of the hard ones. So we have that, and what we do is we go in here and we add a repeater. And this is another really powerful tool for shape layers. So we look at this repeater that we added. Twirl this down, you have a lot of different options. So for me, I added 11 different copies of this to make it a full circle coming around. And what I did was I transformed the repeater. It has this little option for it. And you can rotate the position of things, and you can see how it kind of changes everything and where it is. You can see all the different effects that you could make with this. It was at -33 before, so we'll keep it at that. And you can also change the position, a lot of different, very, very powerful tool. Also, I changed the start opacity and end opacity, so we want this to be 100 for this line, or actually, technically this line. We want it to drop to 10 by the time it's repeated itself a lot of times, to give it that loading bar look that a lot of different programs and things have. So that was just pretty basic, and then we have it animating, rotating over a certain amount of time to make that little loading bar effect, and then it drops out, and then the face appears. So for the face, I'm actually not going to go over. For the face, I'm actually not going to go over this. It is a lot, and it's a lot of animation using the exact same principles. If someone does want me to go over specifically the face, I can do that, but it really is just very, very basic shape layer animation. You know, we got the mouth, the left eye, the right eye. You can kind of see what we have going on here. It's the line for the eyelid at first, or I guess the eyelashes technically. And when it comes up, we then have the eyelid mask. We want to be able to let the eye show, so it kind of animates in, appears, and so you can kind of see what I'm doing here. But you can just use this quick overview to be able to see what sort of is going on here to try and make something similar. If you do need me to go in detail about just this particular part, let me know, and I can go over it. I could like send you the project files or something, no big deal. So that is basically it for the most extreme parts of this. I hope this was a good tutorial. I doubt it was. I really hope you can learn something from this. This is my first tutorial, so I'm sorry that it was terrible, but hope you guys got something out of it. And that is it. Looking forward to seeing some stuff from you guys in the future.